Hello everyone, it's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland reviewer, and I'm here to review Popeye, the Slayer Man. And this is from director Robert Michael Ryan and stars James Robert Stevens as the Sailor Man. And this film is in a long line of films taking old classic properties and turning them into slasher horror films. And here we have a group of young friends who are trying to make a documentary looking at this old abandoned spinach can factory and the mysterious sailor man who seems to be inhabiting it. And this film, I feel like, is the best when it's really leaning into how absurd it is. You know, a big dramatic moment where a can of spinach rolls out from the shadows and signals the arrival of the Sailor Man, or when he starts using catchphrases from the cartoon, or just silly stuff like that, where this film really has a sense of like winking at you and knowing this is absurd and fun. But the film still overall takes itself way too seriously and only dabbles in the playfulness. And it is grim, it is dour, and that's one of the elements that just like really brings you down in this. The direction feels very like dark and gloomy and flat in a way that doesn't really pull you in. It certainly leans into that over-the-top nature of the gore and the practical effects. It isn't quite like Terrifier level because it doesn't prolong it and really stretch it out, but there's some crazy kills here, and it does feel like one of those old school 80s slasher films from like Nightmare on Elm Street and stuff like that, and you know, Friday the 13th. I really feel like they kind of treat the Sailor Man in a very Jason Voorhees-esque. He's just brutish. And, like, you'll just see silhouette of, standing there in his thick-ass forearms, and you're just like, oh my god, it's Popeye. And, like, they really lean into the lore here with, like, his long-lost love, olive oil. And there's some crazy twists that they lean into narratively here, especially when it comes to one of the main characters. And this film just, after a while, just feels like here's an excuse to watch some brutal deaths over and over and over again. Even to the point where it's like some of like the not bad characters get like brutally horrific deaths for like no reason. Because the film actually sets this up where it's like the Sailor Man has some kind of code and really doesn't want to mess with people. And I do appreciate that because this film feels a lot less mean-spirited than some of these other films leaning into this kind of cliche and trope at the moment. But this film honestly has some elements that kind of work, but overall it just leans into way too many tired, uninteresting slasher movie horror tropes and cliches, and these characters are paper thin, and even the ones where it's like they give them some color are usually the bad ones where it's like insufferable amount of negativity, and they throw in bits of romance and stuff like that to try to add some extra oomph to the story, but like, do we really care that much about a budding romance when Popeye the Slayer Man is out there looking to just bust some people up? No, honestly. And even all the way up to the end where they say this, they shoehorn in the title of this movie, and you're just like, well, I can't help but put a smile on my face because it's just too absurd. So this movie wins when it leans into how ridiculous it is. Otherwise, it's kind of a very dour, very violent, but uninteresting slasher flick. But those are my thoughts on Popeye the Slayer Man. Let me know what you think and let's talk some movies. But thank you as always for tuning in and supporting your Wasteland reviewer.